As proposed to be amended, AB 1963 would prohibit the use of paraquat, a powerful weed killer, until the Department of Pesticide Regulation completes a reevaluation of paraquat and establishes appropriate controls to mitigate any potential significant adverse effects of paraquat exposure. Paraquat, which was first manufactured in 1962, is a highly toxic herbicide or weed killer used on nut crops like almonds, pistachios, walnuts, grapes, as well as cotton, soybeans, corn, and others. Paraquat is sprayed to burn down or clear crop fields before planting and throughout the growing season to manage weeds between crop rows. Much of the chemical ends up in soil for years, but it can also linger in dust or drift through the air to nearby communities. This poses an increased risk to people living and working near fields who are exposed to paraquat. The people most at risk of paraquat exposure are primarily agricultural workers who mix, load, or apply paraquat and enter areas after the chemical has been applied, as well as people living in agricultural communities who could be exposed from pesticide drift in the air or in dust. A considerable amount of evidence, and this has been studied for years, from studies in people, especially farm workers, have linked paraquat exposure to the development of Parkinson's disease. Paraquat is banned in more than 60 countries, including those with large agricultural economies, like the United Kingdom, where the country where a lot of paraquat is manufactured. China has banned its use, Brazil, and the members of the European Union. California should follow their lead. Alternative to paraquat use exists today. Why should we continue to use an herbicide that's been around since 1962 when we know we can do better? First and foremost is integrated pest management, or IPM. California's Department of Pesticide Regulation is emphasizing that we need to be using less pesticides and herbicides in their new planning effort, the Sustainable Pest Management. They state IPM is a strategy that focuses on long-term pest prevention through biological controls, habitat manipulation, and other approaches. California needs to be the leader in eliminating highly toxic pesticides and herbicides like paraquat. Furthermore, the pesticide industry, always proud of their ability to innovate, should step forward and agree to stop producing this product and to produce instead less toxic weed killers. With me today is Alexis Temkin, a senior toxicologist at the Environmental Working Group, the sponsor of AB 1963, and I can't be more proud to have sitting next to me Dolores Huerta, icon of labor and protecting vulnerable communities, and the founder of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And with that, I request an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whichever of you would like to go first.
I'm happy to go.
Sure.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Alexis Temkin. I have a PhD in biomedical sciences, and I'm a senior toxicologist with the Environmental Working Group. There is robust science connecting paraquat to Parkinson's disease and other serious health harms that the Environmental Protection Agency has ignored. The herbicide has both acute and chronic toxicity, meaning it can harm people both when they're exposed to a single dose or repeatedly over time to lower doses. Ingestion of paraquat, even just a teaspoon, can cause extreme respiratory and gastrointestinal distress, organ failure, and often leads to death. The link between chronic exposure to paraquat and Parkinson's disease in people was first identified over 35 years ago. Since then, many other studies have connected the two. Research published in 2011 found farm workers who sprayed paraquat were 2.5 times more likely to develop Parkinson's, and the longer they used the herbicide, the stronger the association. Earlier this year, a UCLA study found that people living or working near the most intense paraquat applications in the Central Valley were also more likely to develop Parkinson's disease. And a 2019 meta-analysis, the gold standard for summarizing the science on a particular topic, found that across 13 different studies, occupational and environmental exposure to paraquat increased the risk of developing Parkinson's by 64%, a clear indication of concern. Finally, animal studies provide concrete evidence for how paraquat can damage human brains. Animals exposed to paraquat show changes in behavior and overall motor function, a reduction in the number of dopamine-producing neurons, a reduction in the number of harmful malfunctions in the important brain protein alpha-synuclein, and all of these are hallmarks of how Parkinson's develops in humans. The EPA and Paraquat manufacturers claim that Paraquat can be safely used with proper restrictions. However, the agency openly acknowledges that risks to farm workers persist despite these safety measures, and violations of mishandling have been reported. EWG respectfully urges the committee to pass AB 1963 in order to protect California's farm workers and adjacent communities from the harms of Paraquat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair, and thank you all for having us here today. I am very proud to join Assemblymember Laura Friedman and the Environmental Working Group to support this bill. I have spent my life, my name is Dolores Huerta, and I'm the founder of the Dolores Huerta Foundation for Grassroots Community Organizing and co-founder of the United Farm Workers. I have spent my whole life advocating for better working conditions for our essential workers, for the farm workers that feed us every day. And Paraquat is one of the greatest continuing threats to the health of farm workers today. Paraquat is an innocuously named herbicide that happens to be one of the most toxic herbicides on the market. Working in the fields where Paraquat is present can cost farm workers their health, their livelihood, and their lives. Paraquat has been linked to Parkinson's disease, heart disease, kidney failure, childhood leukemia, and cancer. I'm from Kern County, which happens to be the county that is most heavily impacted by Paraquat. 5 million pounds of Paraquat were sprayed in California between 2017 and 2022. Of that, nearly 1 million pounds of Paraquat was sprayed in Kern County alone in largely Latino, disproportionately poor agricultural communities like Shafter, Wasker, and Delano. Studies show that people working in the fields where Paraquat is sprayed or living nearby are twice as likely to develop Parkinson's disease. Over 80% of residents in Shafter, which is 82% Latino, Wasco, 87% Latino, Delano, California, 76% Latino, Corcoran, 74% Latino, live near the annual spraying of almost 180,000 pounds of Paraquat. We do not need Paraquat. Most California growers don't use Paraquat at all when clearing their fields, nor should the acceptable cost of our food be Parkinson's disease and cancer for the farm workers, the essential workers of California that feed us here and feed the nation, the people that grow and harvest the food that sustains us, or the rural communities surrounded by these agricultural fields. I cannot really believe that this herbicide is still on the market, because we work so hard in the Farm Workers Union to ban so many herbicides and pesticides like DDT, parathion, malathion, dinosaur, and on and on and on. And to know that the Paraquat is still with us, hey, it's time for it to go, okay? And so we want you, please, the committee here and assembly members, to help us get rid of this terrible herbicide that there's so many of our farm workers, they shouldn't have to get Parkinson's or cancer or leukemia or any of these deadly diseases. This is something that we can actually stop, and you have the power to do that. So thank you very much.
Certainly, we understand the situation that they're in. We want to make sure that our farms can succeed as well. But when you have a 2019 meta-study showing, of 13 studies showing a statistically significant association where people exposed to Paraquat are 1.64 times more likely to develop Parkinson's disease, that's a huge increase in people's risk. When we have a chemical that we know is so toxic that, as outlined, you have to go through a number of steps to be able to use it. And we have, at this point, constant violations that we could cite where people were not using the product correctly and where there's so much potential for injury and for death. When you have a chemical that's not allowed by the EPA to be used on golf courses, not because they don't think that people who take care of golf courses are incapable of learning how to properly use Paraquat, but because they don't want the Paraquat exposure for golfers. And yet they're saying it's okay to expose farm workers to the same chemical. There's a problem. So we have amended the bill to make it not a complete ban, but a moratorium while we do look at the product. And I understand this, the opponents would much rather say, let's just keep things as they are until we have more of that data. But I don't believe that it's worth risking people's lives and safety to do that for the next number of years. So, you know, absolutely sympathize and understand. They're just trying to make food for us. We understand that. At the same time, I think we also have an obligation when we see such a high risk to something that's so deadly as Parkinson's to default into the position of being more protective. So I want to thank my witnesses, particularly both of you. But may I say, I've been here. This is my last year in the legislature. I think that this is my proudest moment as an author to be sitting next to Dolores Huerta. So thank you so much for honoring us with your presence and for all of your work. And with that, I would request an aye vote.